just had to make sure it was recording. I know, that's great. We're going to keep this pretty casual for this part of the day. So if you have any questions, feel free at any time. So take it away, Denny.
So a duck walks into an occupational therapy clinic. And he walks up to the guy behind the counter and he says, hey pal, you got any duck food? The guy says, no, duck, sorry, we don't have any duck food here. It's an occupational therapy clinic. And the duck says, okay. He leaves. Next day, same duck goes into the same clinic, walks up to the guy and says, hey pal, you guys got any duck food? The guy says, no, man, we don't sell duck food. This is an occupational therapy clinic. Duck says, okay. He leaves. Third day, same duck, same clinic, goes in there, says to the guy, hey man, you guys got any duck food? This time the guy gets real irate and he says, listen, duck, next time you come in here asking for duck food, I'm going to nail your flippers to the floor. The duck says, ooh, okay. He takes off. Fourth day in a row, same duck, same clinic, goes in there and he says, hey pal, you got any nails? The guy says, no. He says, good, you got any duck food?
As you guys will quickly see, you can always count on Denny for a good joke. So Denny, can you tell us a little bit about, in the last 5 or so years, how you've seen occupational therapy services change?
Oh man, that's, only 5 years ago, I was in a car accident, like Sarah had mentioned, and I ended up in the Glenrose, and through all of the study that I was involved in there, like the coolest thing that they had was a wheelchair that you could wheel with your hands, and it had a gear shift like a mountain bike, so you could like go fast and stuff. They wouldn't let me try it, but that was like the coolest thing, I mean, aside from the shower benches, you guys are going to learn to adjust, and the wheelchair parts, you're going to learn to change. I mean, now, 5 years later, you guys are in occupational therapy, and look at the changes. Like there's, you guys have implants that, they'll implant in my head and then in my arm, and I can think and move my hands. Or, they have implants. They're working on a chip that they put on one side of my spinal cord that bridges the gap between the part of my spinal cord that's damaged. Supposedly it's in rat trials right now, and they're moving it on to human trials. And it allows and returns function to my legs and lower extremities and stuff. So, you guys, in the time that you are now, from the time even 5 years ago from when I was in therapy, it's a totally different world, and it's super exciting. You guys have exoskeletons. Like before, they're like, hey, let's go outside and see if you can wheel over this curb. Now you're going to be like, hey, let's get in the robot suit and go for a rip. So it's a really exciting time to be in occupational therapy.
Since the accident, what aspects of your life have changed?
I would have to say that there probably isn't a single aspect of my life that hasn't changed. I mean, every cell, except for the color of my hair, and even that's a lie because it's gone gray since the accident. So, I mean, everything from the way that I eat. I sit at the table and, elbows off the table, Mabel. Well, I have to lean on the table or put a hand in my lap. It's almost impossible to cut my food. From brushing my teeth in the morning, the way that I rinse my mouth out, I can't go like this, and splash all over my face. So, everything has changed. From the way that I get dressed, I need a bed to roll around on to get my clothes on, to the way that I dress. I used to, jeans were my favorite attire. It didn't matter whether I was at work or at play or doing whatever. Now I dress for comfort. I don't care what it looks like, right? Whatever's easiest to get on and off, and whatever's not going to cause, a relative pressure sore from a seam or something pressing somewhere, or me not transferring or shifting enough.
Excellent. And are there any ways that OTs helped you adjust to some of these changes over the last few years?
In the Glenrose, in the beginning, they taught me all the basics, right? How to sit up, how to transfer, how to care for myself, and, how to bathe, and how to, like I said, brush my teeth and feed and cook and shop and do all those things. I'm just going to look at the question again. I kind of tend to forget stuff.
Don't worry.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay. I know, Denny, you have a couple great stories that are maybe some reminders to us as some things we should keep in mind when we're practicing. So are there any things that you would like to see, you would have liked to see OTs do differently?
When I was at the Glenrose, I'd spent my entire life in the oil field. I grew up on a farm. I was in excellent condition, you know, and when I went to the Glenrose, and at the time of the accident, my wife was 9 months pregnant. My son was born 27 days later. So when I was at the Glenrose during the time of my occupational therapy and my physical therapy, I spent half my days lifting weights and then half my days learning how to get on and off the floor and in and out of my chair, when I think better time could have been spent with, you know, individualizing the situation, saying, okay, well, here's this guy with 3 kids now, one's a baby, and he's now recently been confined to a wheelchair. Let's look at that aspect of the scenario versus the textbook side of the scenario.
And when you left the Glenrose, you were sent to the Leduc Hospital.
Oh yeah, that's
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
So I went, well, when I was in the Glenrose, they taught me how to shower and do all that stuff, right? They'd push me into the shower room in a shower chair, and that was great. But then when I was done at the Glenrose, they sent me to the Leduc Hospital for a couple of months because I lived in a bi-level home and I had to get a lift installed to get into the house. So while I was waiting on that, I went to the Leduc Hospital, and the first time I went down to have a shower, they didn't have showers, they had shower tubs. And this was like, you know, it kind of scared me to look at it, right? But I eventually got myself in, and I was all proud and had my shower and stuff. But then getting out of the shower and everything's wet and everything's slippery and I don't really know how to transfer. I got halfway out of the tub and I was sitting on the edge. I had one hand on the wheelchair and one hand on the holy crap handle. And I was just stuck there, frozen. I didn't know what to do. So I murmured out a little help, and a nurse came in, and I said, you need to help me get in my chair. And she said, I don't know what to do. I'll be right back. And I said, no, don't leave me. And then I sat there for another minute, and then 4 other nurses came in with her. And they all stood there, wondering what to do, and I said, can somebody get me a towel? Right? So I remember being in Glenrose, and I remember them having a tub room, but it was full of old toilet chairs and shower chairs that nobody used anymore. That's what they were storing them, was in this room where I was supposed to learn all this stuff, right? So that got missed.
Yeah. So it might have been nice to learn a few different ways to get in and out of the tub in case you end up somewhere else.
Exactly.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So can you tell us a little bit about how your outlook changed when you went home from the Glenrose?
Oh, yeah. At the Glenrose, you're not prepared for reality. Okay, the Glenrose it's like Disneyland for the disabled, you know? I'm not even kidding. You got 8-foot wide hallways, 500 feet long, elevators, you know. It was insane. And you get home, and all of a sudden there's corners and there's, you know, beds and things. And I went from the shower room to a tub. And, you know, it was a real eye-opener as to what I didn't know. And it was super scary. We didn't spend a lot of time wheeling around outside. They taught me how to go over curbs, and they taught me how to do a couple other things. But when I got home, the thought of taking my children outside of the house onto the sidewalk totally scared me, and we didn't go anywhere for like the first year. I think I was housebound. I wouldn't do it.
And can you tell us a little bit more about what happened when you started looking for work after you were discharged from the hospital?
I was discharged from the Glenrose, and they kind of missed me on this one. I went into the occupational therapy placement program where they tell you what you should be good for at work and what you can do. And when I got released from the Glenrose, I went through the Glenrose in a relatively quick time. It was like 3 months, something like that, give or take a couple of days. And I forget where I was going.
You were talking about the short-term job placement.
Oh yeah, job placement. See notes. So I go to the job placement place, and they tell me, I got out of the Glen Rose anyways, and I was on all these meds and stuff. They just rushed me out, and I didn't detox or anything. So when I went there, my head was just swimming in Percocets and, pain medicine and stuff. And they basically said I was non-retrainable and I would amount to nothing, and I should just go home and sit on CPP or POGI or AISH or whatever it is, And I took that to heart, and that really affected me, and it affected who I was and in every aspect. And when I actually finally had no choice but to go find work because our family was struggling money-wise, I had no choice but to go back to welding, which is what I knew. And it definitely had its difficulties, but I made it work. And everybody at work was, they were always there to help me whenever I needed the opportunity
And how was it, Denny, when you went home and all of a sudden you were a stay-at-home dad and now it was your wife who was out working? How was that for you emotionally and physically?
It's really hard to, switch roles with your wife when you're like this iron work and welding, all these things. And now all of a sudden I'm making bread and, changing diapers and going to the store for stuff, and she's never home. And it was a real eye-opener, and it was hard. I mean, she went back to work and I didn't even know how to drive. She just said, "Okay, you need to get your shit together, and this is how it's going to happen. I'm going to work today. See ya. There's a van outside with hand controls in it. Bring me a coffee," she said. And she left, and I was sitting at home, and I was like, "Oh, man, what do I do?" So I bailed in the shower, and I got dressed, and my first venture outside of the house was, to go out and drive this van with the hand controls. And I'm telling you that it changed me that day. That was a major milestone for me to be mobile again, outside of the house without my chair. And I take the little blue parking cart off, and I'm just like everybody else,
So Denny, you've been a participant in quite a few research studies now. Can you tell us a little bit more about why you feel it's important for you to participate in research?
After the accident, they had already told me you're paralyzed and it's never going to change and stuff, and I didn't want that. I couldn't accept it. And I had mentioned it to my wife, like, don't leave me here in this chair. And she pushed me into the U of A and to SCITS with Louise Miller and got me into some studies. And it's great because me as a single person, my voice is only this big. But if I can put myself into all these studies which branch out because of what they learned from me, that makes my voice this much bigger, And I've been involved in all these studies over the last 4 years, and I think it's good, not just for the interaction, but for my input on the situation as well, right?
And you had to get a little creative, right, to participate in a few of these studies?
I've definitely lied my way in to a few, because I'm a T2-3 with T4 sensation, but everybody wants T6 or lower for these studies, so I tend to fudge something until I get there, and they're asking me to fill out all the paperwork, and then I'm very honest about it. And I'm like, oh, T2-3, T4, and they're like, oh, wow, you're kind of, and I'm like, well, I'm here. And the outcome has always been exceptional. From their point of view, like, they're always like, oh, man, I had no idea. I can't believe you did that. So you can't be thinking what the textbook says,
And in a few, you mentioned to me before, there was one particular study.
Oh, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
I can't remember what it was called. It had to do with, I think, the way that I wheel and the way that I use my trunk core and all that stuff. And I went in there, and they were all disappointed because I was not the correct T. So they hooked all these sensors up to me, and they wanted to monitor how my core strength moves as I wheel. And they put me on this drum like that rolls, and they anchored my chair from the front to the back, and I just have to wheel on this thing, and there's a screen in front of me that tells me how fast I'm going. And they say, you got to stay within this parameter. And I said, okay. So I'm going, and it's about a 20-minute test, they say, and as I'm going, every like 30 seconds, they're tightening up this drum on me, and they're measuring my oxygen and how much energy I'm using and stuff. And I'm about 7 minutes in, and I'm not really tired, but I'm getting bored with the whole thing, you know? I'm just sitting in one spot, wheeling at a screen with numbers on it. So I got them to start playing Eye of the Tiger, okay, on YouTube, and they played it twice. I went for like 18 minutes. I totally slayed the record by like 7 minutes. And everybody was like, oh man, I can't believe that just happened. And I was like, yeah, Eye of the Tiger, you know?
So can you tell us a little bit more about your participation in the ReWalk research and sort of some of the impacts that that's had for you?
I got involved with the ReWalk. Like I said, I've thrown myself under the bus, the U of A bus, for the last few years, and I just kept phoning in and keeping in contact, and I phoned in one day and said, hey, what's going on? You guys haven't phoned me in a while. And they had mentioned about the ReWalk and how this is coming into play and if I would like to get on board, and I was like, silly question. I'm in, right? So then I think we waited like 8 months or so, and then it finally came in, and yeah, totally amazing. Like, you guys are in it. It's cool, right? So like, I go into the U of A here, and here's the ReWalk, and everything's all set up, and we go into the whole standing part of it. And it took me a couple of weeks just to figure out the balance, since I'm head on broomsticks with, you know, when I'm standing, I got no equilibrium, basically. I'm all over the place. And we did that for a couple of weeks, and then we started working on the initial steps. And after a little while, away we went. Started breaking milestones. And the impact that it's had on me is just, you know, my self-confidence levels are up, my energy levels are up. I want to go out. I can't wait till I get to come in here every time and to do it, right? It's just so exciting. My kids love it. My wife loves it. I mean, it's super exciting.
What are some of the health benefits that you've noticed?
Definitely bowel and bladder, more regular, less infections, which is huge. I usually get a bladder infection once a month, but since I've been in the ReWalk, it's definitely been down. And spasms are down. My legs aren't as spastic, and the colonus and stuff is down. Pressure sores, things like that, they're all down. And, you know, like the blood flow and the way that the oxygen gets to the lower extremities of the body. And I'm really interested in life longevity. You know, I haven't raised this question yet, and I don't know where this is going to go, but they always say that people in wheelchairs have a lower life expectancy, right? Well, what if I can walk? Is that going to make a difference? Am I going to live longer? I'm definitely going to live a fuller, enriched life with this.
What are some of the things you've noticed in interacting with your family since the ReWalk? I know you mentioned a story with your mom.
Well, yeah, my mom, she came out to the city, and she came to see me in the ReWalk for the first time, and the first thing that she wanted to do was give me a standing hug, right? That was her big thing, and she started to cry. And she pulled a mom on me in the U of A.
Was there anything else you wanted to mention about the ReWalk, or I think that was most of what you had? We can turn the floor and see if anyone else has any questions.
Yeah, sure.
Does anyone have any questions for Denny? Yeah, go ahead.
You mentioned that you returned to work as a welder, and I'm just curious as to what sort of modifications you have at work.
None.
Just for Calgary, the question was surrounding his return to work as a welder, and if there were any modifications he made for that.
Oh, sorry, there is actually. I built myself a lower table that's like this high so I could work off of it. That's about it. Everything else, I just used a jib crane or a crane to roll the material or do whatever. Sometimes I've actually strapped myself to the crane and picked myself up onto stuff. You know?
Denny, what's a jib crane?
A jib crane is just a crane that is attached to the wall, and it swings out on a jib like this. Of course, there's definitely two hands. I run the lift, and somebody just pushes me around.
Any other questions? Yeah.
Are you still working full hours as a welder?
No, I quit my job to join in the ReWalk because it was 5 days a week, and my wife went to work as an apprentice electrician, so things are working like that for now. I'm doing the whole stay-at-home dad thing, and I don't mind it.
Any Yeah.
How many minutes or hours would they have you in the ReWalk per day, I guess?
The question for Calgary was, how long are you spending in the ReWalk each day?
When I was in the study, it was 5 days a week, an hour to an hour and a half a day. And now I'm in the clinic, which is only 1 day a week, an hour a day.
And Denny's hoping to buy his own ReWalk.
Yeah, I'm funding to buy the first personalized ReWalk in Canada.
Any questions from Calgary?
Have you gotten to the point where you're confident enough to walk around with it without any support with ReWalk?
You have to have the crutches with it,
Okay.
but there's not saying that I haven't attempted.
Yeah.
Don't tell Donna and the next person going into the study that I said or tried that.
Denny likes to push the limit on things, as you might have been able to tell. So
I was actually able to manage 2 full steps without any crutches. There was a lot of screaming afterwards, but
from you or from the research
from the
ladies?
research ladies.
That's what I figured.
But I mean, what was I there for? They weren't testing me, right? They're there to test the ReWalk. I'm just a test pilot.
Do you want to take it away, Denny, with your... Oh, there's another question.
I'm just wondering, when you tried to go back to your workforce, was there any obstacles in finding employers that would accommodate you?
Actually,
The question was, when he went back to work, was there any resistance from, or did you have any hard time finding an employer who was willing to hire you on?
Actually, when I went back to work, I was initially hired on. They were going to teach me how to do like AutoCAD, and they wanted I spent 17 years in the oil field, like I said, in the welding trade, and they wanted to use my input in the AutoCAD to design and develop things. And it just started out as, hey, do you think you could build that? And I was like, yeah. So the less designing I did, the more back work I did, and the less office work I was given, and the more back work I obtained. So that I just ended up rolling right back into my role as a welder, and yeah, that was fine with me.
Denny, like Sarah had expressed, you have this tendency to want to push the limit. You've talked a lot about your work and your personal family before, but what about hobbies? Like, did you do extreme sports and did you do
Well, I used to be into dirt biking and stuff like that. And after the accident, I just bought myself my first brand new dirt bike ever. You only had hand-me-downs or whatever. So I rode that for one summer, and then the accident. So then we sold it, and I kept some money on the side just in case something had come up. And I couldn't afford a side-by-side, and I didn't want a quad, and something it had to have a full roll cage for obvious reasons. So I found a 1985 Honda Odyssey FL 350. None of you guys know what that are, because anyways, they were the only Odyssey built back in the day that had reverse. So the first thing I did was pull the motor out of it, which had 30 horsepower, and I put another motor in it with 110 horsepower. So that's what I do. I tried sledge hockey and stuff, and I didn't mind it, but I played hockey before, and I like the fast pace, and I love, getting smashed in open ice, and it's just not like that. It's not the same. So it wasn't my forte. And I wanted to try wheelchair rugby, but I'm not disabled enough. So that's about as far as I go. Yeah, you have to have missing some I have too much dexterity in my fingers. You guys will have to Google that. I'm not going to tell you.
Denny, why don't you wrap us up with your sort of final take home?
Okay, the message that I was trying to convey to all you guys, and I'm going to convey it just as a message, just to make sure that you guys got it, is I just want you guys to I'm not your average guy. Okay, I don't know if any of you noticed that, but I'm not. And I was textbooks, and I was labeled as the average textbook going through the Glenrose and stuff, and and I'm not. And I think you guys need to individualize and take into account what's going on in that person's life at the time that they're in rehabilitation. Like I said, I didn't need weight training and all that stuff. The last thing I learned on the last day I was at the Glenrose was how to get in my chair if I ever fell out. So the first time I fell out of my chair, I couldn't get back in because it didn't work. I had to YouTube it and learn a different way. You know, so I don't know, you guys, you gotta individualize and personalize with the person that you're dealing with and create a routine that fits their life, not create a routine that your book tells you to follow.
Awesome.
Conveyed?
Thank you, Denny, for coming to speak. All right, thank you very much.